That's fantastic. Well, you and I are trumpeting the same song, and let's keep doing that together, and we will do it together. As a matter of
Absolutely.
fact, as a side note, we just had our screening at the Cleveland Clinic here in Las Vegas over the weekend for second base, and it went spectacularly well. Wonderful. And Ruth Almain, I don't know if you know her, she's a social worker out here, but she said she was going to be making contact in Cleveland to see if we could get a screening out there and do some stuff with the Indians. Again, because that's my whole point with Boys of Summer is let's connect more communities. Let's keep telling more stories. So hopefully you and I will meet
No,
up and we'll do that, okay?
yeah, absolutely, yes. And offline, we should have another discussion
We
about
will.
that. So,
Absolutely.
absolutely, that'd be great.
So, okay, good. We did that. Let's get on to DBS. I read on the Michael J. Fox Foundation page that you were doing work with DBS. Here's my perspective on DBS that for the people I've seen it work, it's worked wonderfully. And I've seen my dad be recruited actively by people with Parkinson's to say, you got to do this. This is something amazing. And my dad's looked into it. He's a little older. He's 73. And he has been told by his board that he was not eligible for that reason, although I've heard from a Medtronic's representation that's not necessarily true. There's mixed stories out there before. And my dad has concerns about the very simple process of getting a drill into his head, which is a very primary, understandable fear.
Sure.
Tell me what you know about DBS because it sounded like, from what I read, you're working on making it, do more of what its promise was to be, to act in a more grand fashion or act in a more whole body way. I don't know if I'm
Sure.
getting that right, but
Yeah, yeah. No, I think, I am a big fan of, I'm a fan of DBS, but with some certain caveats, right? I think you have to have the appropriate screening, and that includes the evaluation of a very talented movement disorder specialist who actually is involved in the deep brain process, deep brain stimulation programming process and selection process. I also think as part of that, you need to have a neuropsychological evaluation because we know that there are challenges sometimes with DBS that it interrupts or disrupts some of the cognitive functioning of patients. So you wouldn't want to have someone who's borderline mildly cognitive impaired undergo deep brain stimulation. And then finally, the surgical team is critical. Have they done a lot of DBS surgeries, and what are their outcomes? So I always talk about it or think about it as, first thing is it's a lot like real estate, right? DBS largely depends on the accuracy of the lead being placed, right? Do you place the lead in the right spot? And, so you look at your surgical team, do they have a lot of experience in that? If they do, okay, that checks potentially one box. And then the other is, what about the people who are doing the programming? And how are they using, so that's really the challenge, right? Is programming the stimulators to make sure you get the appropriate response. And how are they evaluating what the appropriate response is? If they're trying to just get you in and out rapidly, I would say you probably don't want to go there. But if they are very systematic about the stimulation parameters and setting them and patient, then that's, again, it sort of may check a box in terms of this could be a right center for you. And
yeah.
then finally, I think it becomes also you have to make this decision, and I understand your father's reticence for sure, especially when other things are working. So because there are side effects or potential side effects or complications. Now, again, those are for the most part you can control those or have good outcomes if you're using a good surgical process, et cetera. But yeah, I'm a fan of DBS. Do I think it's the only thing? No. Do I think exercise or medication are the only thing? No. I think you have to figure out, and this is where I think it's so important, that patients take a very active role in their treatment. So I think the fact that your father is saying, I don't want to do it, and he has reasons, good reasons for it, it is fine, because the key, I think, is being active in the treatment process and being educated about it. And so, yeah, that's my general feeling. So my area of research is trying to improve different outcomes or improve outcomes using very objective or quantitative methods of programming these systems. So we're trying to actually, instead of just use, expert opinion or are you getting better, do you feel better, actually using measures of balance and postural stability to potentially change or improve stimulation parameters.
That's great. That's great. Now, does, how rapidly is that changing with the actual technology of the device? Is it a hand in hand thing? You're measuring, the devices themselves are improving?
Yeah, I think devices themselves are improving, and I think the next real big, um, the big advance, because there are some subtle differences between the three different groups that manufacture the electrode or systems. I think the next big advance will become or be related to the ability to program these devices and systems efficiently and effectively using very objective measures so you don't have to go to someone who's programmed 1,000 patients. Rather you can leverage some of that knowledge, but can also use more objective quantitative measures to guide programming.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, it's a very interesting field. It's come an awful long way because, again, I remember my dad getting recruited back in 2004 when we were on our original Boys of Summer trip going around the country by a stark raving fan who had just had it done. And at the time, he was only 59. So, he was
Yeah,
considering it. And over the years, he's still not completely closed the door, although the door was partially closed for him. We're just, like you said, we're actively engaged. And I heard a good thing from Jimmy Choi. You know him, the American Ninja Warrior fellow with
yeah,
Parkinsons?
yeah.
Great guy. And he talked about exactly what you were saying, the education process, but not by Googling.
Right.
That was the danger zone. Instead, what he did, and I try to advocate for this because I think this is great, is get involved in clinical trials because he found by talking to people, experts in the field at that level, he got a lot of time with them. He got to see his body engaging in these processes, and he got to learn along the way about pushing himself a little bit too in times. So that kind of education really meant a lot to him.
No, I couldn't agree more. And so, whenever I give a talk, one of my final take-home points is, be an active participant. Well, how do you do this? Join exercise, et cetera. The other one is enroll in a clinical trial. If you want, I'll call it white glove service, you enroll in a clinical trial. I mean, everyone there's a whole study team who has a vested interest in you and the project. And so if again, people say, well, my doctor didn't spend much time with me. Guess what? They would spend a lot more time with you probably if you were in a clinical trial they were running.
Yeah,
Um,
that's been our experience too, and so nice to hear you're an advocate. I'm an advocate. I'm actually working with UNLV on a telehealth clinical trial right now, so actively involved in it as well because I agree it's super important.
Yeah, no, that's great. And telehealth obviously is a big area, and how can we use technology to bring people together, especially folks who may have mobility challenges and can't wait to see or can't make it to the clinic every 6 months or just need something in between. You know.
Yep. Yeah. And that's why we hope we keep pushing that direction. Jay, you've been so generous with your time. I really do appreciate it. And like you said, we'll talk offline. I look forward to speaking to you more. But again, thanks for joining me here.
No, absolutely, anytime. And congratulations on the great production there. And I definitely look forward to seeing it in Cleveland.
You betcha. All right. For Faces of Parkinson's, this is Robert Cochran. We'll see you next time.